We're live.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this special meeting of Mahone Bay's Town Council. Councilors, you have an agenda that was emailed out to you. There was one item on that agenda, that being the presentation on the solar garden project, which we're about to enjoy. But the issue around the PVEC graduation ceremony has come up. And I would ask you to consider a motion to add the discussion around that to our agenda.
I would make that motion.
Okay, moved and seconded by Councillor Bain. Would you entertain the motion as an opening piece, or would you prefer to wait till after the solar garden discussion?
I prefer personally to do it first.
Councillor Bain, are you comfortable with that on your motion?
Yes, I am.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to amend the agenda as presented to add the discussion around the PVEC graduation program and to have that discussion as item number 1 on the agenda. All in favor? Motion's carried. Okay, so we'll go to the PVEC graduation. This was a piece of correspondence that came in. There's been a lot of chatter back and forth for the last week with a group of parents of the young folk who are graduating at PVEC. And the plan is to provide them with some kind of a graduation ceremony in lieu of, the prom, that kind of thing, to happen on June 25th. And there is a rather extensive program being prepared for them. There's been a number of different groups in Bridgewater, most notably the LCLC and the fire department and the police department, who have been involved in the different logistics involved with this. And now the PVEC graduation organizing committee, the parents, are requesting Lunenburg, Mahone Bay, Bridgewater, and MODL take the opportunity to provide some financial support for this project. In particular, the request to Mahone Bay is for $500. What is council's wish? Colleen? I'm sorry, Councillor O'Neill?
Okay, Mayor, I move that Town of Mahone Bay Council approve a $350 donation toward the graduation ceremonies at toward PVEC. Yeah, that's my motion.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Deputy Mayor Noss seconds it. On the question,
Do we know who we're actually making the donation to? Like who's the official recipient of the donation?
the organizer of record is the LCLC.
And has there been any feedback at all from the school board and or the administration of the high school regarding the event, sanctioning it in any way?
Councillor O'Neill?
I understand, having spoken at length with the organizer, that this is an entirely separate and non-sanctioned event with respect to the school or the school board. However, it is being emceed by Mark Fury, and it is supported by the fire department, who will be overseeing the fireworks. The police are going to be present in force, helping people social distance, physical distance, and conduct this safely. ENS will be present, as will quite a number of, it sounds fairly well organized, parent volunteers. It's a fully outdoor, no contact event. And it sounds very well conceived and organized. So that's what I know about it. It sounded very solid to me in terms of the plan. And I also do understand, although I haven't independently verified it, that it has been vetted and verified by the director of the LCLC.
Yeah, I believe the LCLC are the focal point for facilities that the young people may need as they're involved in this program. It's going to be a music program for them. There's a local DJ service has been retained. And as Councillor suggested, the fire department is involved with the fireworks display. Councillor Carver.
Yes, a question for Mr. Hyde. Could you refresh my memory about money that we give annually to PVEC, if any?
I don't believe we have any annual specific contribution or grant. We do give money to the school board.
Yes, separate from the school board. So partly I was just wondering whether we're setting a precedent on doing this. And
I would suggest
I
this
share-
event is kind of an unusual one in that sense. I don't think there's any expectation that this event would continue, but I suppose in that sense, we'd have to revisit it.
Yeah, so I'm just registering my hesitations, hoping that I'm not sounding curmudgeonly about it. But I also respond to Councillor Feeney's query about who is the money going to?
I think what we have right now officially is we have a email request from a random parent. That's what we have from that's backstopping the request. If there's an email coming from a controlling authority, whether it be the MLA, the fire hall, some official in some official capacity, then I'm fully willing to support the motion. But there has to be some controlling authority, somebody with a mandate who has not only taking it upon themselves to do this charitable act, which I think is a terrific initiative if sanctioned. But again, with that charity comes responsibility, and the responsibility for whatever happens at this event and anything that happens as a result of this gathering, somebody needs to be in charge, and someone has to have the authority to be in charge. And if Dylan can be made satisfied that controlling authority is in place, but I'm happy to support the motion. But if all we're going to get is that email from a parent, then I'd recommend we wait a little longer and find out who's really in charge.
It's not unlike a festival, I would think, Councillor Feeney. I mean, who is really in charge when we have a festival? There are a number of different organizations like the fire department and the police department that are.
We have insurance, right? There's
playing a key
insurance in
role.
place.
It might be a question as to what the liability for the town of Mahone Bay could be if we make a donation, but I don't think we've ever had that discussion about any of the things that we donate to. Councillor Now had his hand up first.
Do we have any idea of what the money's going towards? Do they have some sort of a budget as to what's there, what it's going to be spent on?
Councillor O'Neill?
So I sent a fairly, an event description just prior to this meeting. So to describe the proceedings, I understand that their original budget was $7,500, which was going to include personalized signs. And then their initial budget estimate was $6,300, which had some contingencies built in. And now that they're closer to the actual costs, their full budget is a $5,000 budget. And the money will be spent on things like the fireworks and the AV equipment, the screens, and such things.
They had originally had a budget of $15,000, and that's when every graduate was going to have a sign provided with their picture on it, which would go on their family's lawn as the home of a graduate, but that piece fell by the wayside. Deputy Mayor.
Well, as we all know, we're in different times. This probably may never happen. So let's get on with the vote. I mean, it is a simple little issue. If this was a normal graduation ceremony, I might look at it, but Come on, let's have a vote.
Okay. All in favor of the motion?
Excuse me,
Councillor Carver?
point of order. If a councillor has requested that the vote be held, that issue needs to be put to council. Are we ready for the vote?
Okay. Are we ready? All in favor of having the vote? Okay,
I'm not.
okay. Did you have another point you'd like to make, Councillor?
Well, I realize it is an unusual time, and we haven't got clear whether this particular request fits our grants and donations policy. And I really admire the parent group for getting this together, but I'm still responding to Councillor Feeney's concern about who are we giving this money to.
Okay,
So I think that is a concern. So,
Councillor Bain.
What was the result of the vote?
Pardon me?
What was the result of the vote?
The result of the vote is that we should have the vote on the motion.
Okay, let's get on.
All
with
right.
it.
All in favor of the motion? Motion is, wait now, 1, 2, 3, 4. Motion's carried. All right. Thank you for that. Let's go to our solar garden, community solar garden project. This has been percolating on the back burner for quite some time. The CAO and his counterparts and the rest of the staff at the area have been working long into the night to put this project together. Sean, if you would.
Thank you very much, Mayor Davini. First of all, thank you to everyone on council this evening for taking the time to attend the presentation. I'll run through this, and if folks have questions, please don't hesitate to ask, and we can go through it. And then at the end, we'll certainly have time for an open discussion as well. I've had the pleasure of meeting Mayor Davini and Deputy Mayor Noss at a previous area board meeting, and certainly hoping to meet the rest of council once we're out of this situation with COVID in Mahone Bay and do a follow-up in person. So without further ado, I'll jump into this. So I'm going to try and share my screen here. So bear with me, and we'll just make sure that everyone's able to view this before we jump into the content. Is everyone able to view my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So by way of introduction here, I'm Sean Fleming, working with the Alternative Resource Energy Authority. With me this evening, I've got Aaron Long and Lenter Wright, which I think you both know. They're both just to the right and left of me, outside of camera. So as I mentioned previously, I haven't had the pleasure to meet everyone yet, so I'll just start off with a very quick background about myself. So I joined AREA in December 2019, primarily to lead the Solar Gardens project and also to provide some redundancy within the organization. Previous to that, I'd worked for one of the solar contractors in Nova Scotia since 2011. And had studied mechanical engineering at Dalhousie. So my career to date has been in the solar sector here in Nova Scotia. It's a very exciting sector and something I'm glad to be a part of. So very much enjoyed my time with AREA to date and working with the municipal staff on this project. So wanted to extend a thank you to council for the opportunity to work on these exciting projects in an industry I really care about. There's a lot of exciting opportunities with AREA and municipal electric utilities. So very glad to be a part of that and wanted to thank you for that opportunity. So we'll jump into the presentation here. So first of all, just wanted to address some of the challenges and opportunities around solar in Nova Scotia and how they pertain to the municipal electric utility. So there are some challenges with traditional net metering solar for municipal electric utilities like Mahone Bay. So first of all, I think we need to recognize that citizens and businesses within the community, they're anxious and enthusiastic to decarbonize and enthusiastic to see that within their community, as are most citizens in Nova Scotia. And there's been significant uptake to date in net metered solar in Nova Scotia. So over the last 5 years, it's gone from about 300 kilowatts AC up to over 6,000 kilowatts AC at the end of 2019. So the vast majority of that uptake has been in the residential market. And a lot of that's been driven through funding programs or rebate programs through Efficiency Nova Scotia, primarily their Solar Homes program. So that's not a permanent program for residential solar, but it can be considered a proxy for a low cost future. And solar technology has declined in cost considerably over the last decade. And I think that gives the demand that program has driven, gives a view into where residential and commercial solar can go in terms of pricing and the customer adoption of that technology under that costing scenario. So there is important implications for that for the municipal electric utilities, in that there's been some studies in Berwick that have indicated that each residential solar system that's installed costs the municipal electric utility about $700 per year in revenue. So the 5 main challenges that I wanted to talk about, I'll just go through them here. So first, in terms of energy cost. So when folks put a solar system on their roof, they're being credited the full retail amount for that electricity. So in Mahone Bay, around 13 cents a kilowatt hour. In comparison, the municipal electric utility is only saving the energy portion of that cost. So about 8 cents a kilowatt hour or so. So for each kilowatt hour of solar that's put onto the grid through a net metering program, the municipal electric utility would lose approximately 5 cents a kilowatt hour. And that loss is essentially a cost transfer from those that are able to afford solar and have the opportunity to put that on their roof or their business, and other ratepayers. And there's been extensive studies around solar adoption in the US, and the folks that are typically able to install solar are at the upper end of the income spectrum. So this cost transfer tends to be from those that are at the upper end of economic opportunity to those who can less afford it, and those who may be in energy poverty and I think need help getting by. So it's certainly not the most appropriate of ways to transfer costs between ratepayers in the community. The other avenue that we're trying to address through, or that is a challenge through net metering is participation. So right now, in order to participate in net metered solar, you need to have your own property where you're able to install a system. So citizens that rent or businesses who might lease property aren't able to participate. And even if you do own your own building, you need to have a suitably south-facing roof in good condition without shading, where you're able to install that system. So there are a number of barriers around participation that are a challenge with conventional solar.
Sean, would you prefer to have the councillors ask their questions as you present, or would you prefer to have them wait until a particular point in the presentation?
Oh, and my apologies if I'm missing questions here, because I can't see all the faces while I've got the screen up. I think I'm easy either way here if folks have a strong preference. I think it might be easier if we do it at the end, but I'm happy to take questions now too if it's
okay.
If folks have some burning ones they want addressed.
I can see them all. Nobody's saying a thing. They're just sitting there riveted, waiting for the next statement.
Okay. So I'll continue, but feel free to pipe up if I've missed something or touched on something that you want expanded. So the next challenge around conventional net metered solar is around control. So when when solar is put on roofs or buildings in the community, the electric utility doesn't have any visibility or control over those assets. And that's in contrast to a centralized system like a community solar garden, where that system can actually be used for grid support services. So that could be voltage control, ramp rate control. So the number of technical aspects that a centralized system can provide. And the final challenge is around lack of alternatives. So this gets back to the enthusiasm that citizens have around decarbonizing. And right now, there isn't an alternate clear investment path that they have for participating in solar energy. So net metering, is typically the way they would be able to do that. We want to be able to harness that energy and enthusiasm and channel it into some other program. And that's really where the community solar gardens opportunity comes from. And there's really three main strong advantages of the community solar garden concept that we're really trying to take advantage of. The first is the economies of scale. So the ability to scale this up from maybe a couple of kilowatts on your house up to multi-megawatts for the utility can really help bring down the installed cost of these systems and make it more affordable for both the municipal electric utility, but also for citizens who might want to participate and invest in the project. Additionally, when it's run through the municipality, there are a number of different funding streams that are available to communities that aren't available to private citizens and businesses. Primarily, the one we'll be discussing later in this presentation is through Infrastructure Canada, and the non-repayable contributions there are significant, and they're in the range of about 73%. And again, so that can help bring down the installed cost and the investment amount that folks would need to participate in the program. So the next one is around access, and we're really viewing this as a question of equity between ratepayers and citizens in the community. So as I mentioned previously, if you don't own a building, you're not able to currently participate in solar. So there's renters in the community, whether those are citizens or businesses that may be interested in decarbonizing their electricity supply, investing in renewable energy, but currently don't have access to it. So with a community solar garden, those citizens and businesses will be able to buy into a system and receive a credit on their bill, regardless if they're property owner or a renter or a leaser. So that provides a significant advantage and really opens this program up to a lot more participation within the communities than you'd traditionally be able to do through net metered solar. Additionally, in terms of equity and access, one of the barriers with traditional solar is around the capital costs associated with it. When we look at a community solar model where we can scale the investments, it could be down to $1,000 or maybe in a couple of solar panels, maybe a couple of $100. You've got the ability to scale the way people can participate in the project and invest in the project, rather than having to invest in a complete solar system with all the equipment on the roof of their business or their home. So by removing that capital cost barrier and to make it scalable with the way folks want to participate, and also to add increments over time if they so desire, we're removing some of the capital cost challenges as well. Related to the costs of participating as well is the concept of liquidity. So if you buy a solar system and put it on your house, your business, it's challenging to sell that system. You could try to do that on Kijiji or something, but it's not easy to cash out on that. So with the ownership of the system through the municipality, and the municipality having its own electric utility, it's got the ability to buy back shares or access on that project from the citizens, and then resell those to other folks who may want to participate. So for citizens or businesses who are interested in this, that gives them a lot more flexibility than you traditionally have in a solar system on your house or your business. And finally, and I think very importantly, is risk management. So traditionally, folks aren't, most homeowners or businesses, they're not necessarily experts in solar energy. And by allowing the municipal electric utility and area to assist in managing this, they've got the ability to hand off some of those technical decisions in terms of sizing, technology selection to experts in the field. And the construction of that system and the operations of that system and the risks associated with that are handed off to the town to manage on behalf of the citizens and businesses who want to participate. So, questions around whether or not my roof is going to leak and, how do I replace or reshingle my roof that are traditionally a concern of folks that want to participate in net metered solar, we're able to alleviate those concerns by putting this system out into a field, in this case, a brownfield redevelopment at RPS, and address some of those operational considerations and risks in a straightforward manner. So I'm going to pass this slide on to Lenta to talk about some of the research and community engagement that she's been involved with.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Major Vinny and councillors, for the opportunity. Our research started about a year ago with an expression of interest for marketing and research services, which ultimately led to the appointment of ThinkWell Shift as our partner in this. ThinkWell started the process with a literature review and identified several case studies of community solar gardens in Canada that is relevant to our MEUs and that will help us to develop successful community participation. In January, Area and ThinkWell hosted 2 focus group sessions in my own bay to test the findings of the literature review, as well as, among other topics, customer interest in community solar gardens. The first major takeaway of the focus groups was that the residents are really proud to live in a town that is seen to be progressive and is not just talking about environmental issues, but is actively seeking to make a difference. Residents rated the town as trustworthy and that they would be interested and willing to participate and invest in a project with the town. Although initially there was low awareness of what a community solar garden is, once the concept was explained, there was high interest in and support for such a project. The environmental benefits and helping the most vulnerable in the community rated very highly among the participants of the focus groups. Area is currently working on designing of the project and the marketing material, and once all our funding mechanisms are in place, we intend to roll out the campaigns with ambassador engagement and printed and digital campaigns. The community solar engagement will have an element of education around the concept of a community solar garden, explaining exactly what that means and how that benefits the community. And messaging will be, as Sean said, of inclusion, where everyone can participate, whether you own or rent or lease a property. Highlighting also the environmental benefits and again, taking care of the vulnerable in our communities. The literature review done by ThinkWell Shift showed that most successful community solar gardens had highly relied on community engagement through every step of the process. Area fully intends to do exactly that. For every step of the process, we will have high community engagement, and post that, we will continue to engage with citizen investors on an annual basis.
Thank you very much. So now I'm going to walk through the project development process that we've been working on. So this is based on a 3-step process that Area successfully implemented for the Ellershouse wind farm. So the 3 phases that we've broken this into are the project concept, phase 1, phase 2 planning, and then phase 3 construction and operations. So the concept for this project would have started back in 2018, and this was trying to sort out how we could harness that desire for decarbonization of the citizens of Mahone Bay and drive that to co-invest with their municipality rather than in traditional net metered solar, trying to create a win-win for both. So area and the other area municipalities, so Mahone Bay, Berwick, and the town of Antigonish, had applied to the provincial government for their low carbon communities program, and this was to help develop these projects and to do some of the due diligence and engineering activity associated with them. And I think it's worth mentioning here that in terms of project concepts, the Department of Energy has been a very enthusiastic supporter of the towns and areas work on these projects. So they're excited to see the community solar model proven within the municipal electric utility territories, so that they've got an opportunity then to roll that out to other Nova Scotians outside of those 3 municipalities. Then late in 2019, AREA released a request for information on behalf of the 3 towns on the solar gardens. So this was to test industry's interest in the project, different delivery mechanisms, pricing on the projects, and to really try and understand what was the best way we could deliver these projects on behalf of the towns to get the most returns and the most economic value out of them. And the way we've decided to proceed with these projects is for AREA to work as a construction contractor on behalf of the municipalities. And that brings us into the planning phase, which we're in now. So that funding that we got through the Department of Energy, the Low Carbon Communities Fund, we've been using that for geotechnical investigations, design services, grid interconnection studies, energy modeling on these sites, so the solar resource assessment, testing the financials of the projects to ensure that they're going to work appropriately. The final stages in terms of the planning exercises will be applying for funds for the construction of these projects. So that'll be that Infrastructure Canada Fund that we'll be talking about a little bit later on. And also the public engagement and marketing activities that Lenta and Think Well Shift have been involved with, as well as with Catherine on behalf of Town of Mahone Bay. Final phase here is the construction side of that. The first thing we need to do, and obviously before this project would be able to move forward, is to secure the construction funding through Infrastructure Canada. Then we do an iteration and update to any of the design work that's previously been done. So there's been significant innovation in the solar side and technological change. So if there's new solar module technologies, inverter technologies that comes out in between the design work that we've done to date and when we move to construction, we'll make sure that we're updating our designs appropriately to take advantage of that. Releasing tenders for construction, the construction scopes and supply of equipment. So we're planning to do that later this summer, and that'll be done in parallel to the funding application. So we'll be submitting something into Infrastructure Canada, provided that it has Council's blessing to proceed. And then in parallel to that, developing tenders for the construction scopes and equipment supply, so that if we're awarded the funding from Infrastructure Canada, we're ready to move quickly on that. Once we have the tenders out, funding secured, we'd be building the project, and in parallel to that, developing plans for monitoring operations and maintenance to make sure it's a healthy asset and we're able to verify its operation down the road. So, as I said on the previous slide, right now we're in the planning phase of the project. So provide an update on the progress to date. So the 4 scopes here: geotechnical assessment, system impact studies, the design services, and resource measurement. Again, these were all covered under that Low Carbon Communities Fund with the Department of Energy. So area and the towns received $120,000 of grant funding through the Department of Energy to support these scopes. And we've delivered these on budget. So total delivered costs of $239,000 versus a $232,000 approved budget. So just slightly over. In terms of the geotechnical assessments, that was the first design service that we kicked off. And this was to test the suitability of the soil at that RPS site. So that was awarded to Gemtech. They're a consultant based in New Brunswick, but with a local office in Bears Lake. I believe they're doing some other work on behalf of the town of Mahone Bay as well. So they did borehole drilling and bedrock coring at the RPS site. No significant concerns there or issues raised. So that really confirmed the site suitability from a ground technical perspective there. There's some issues we need to be aware of from a foundation perspective, and we're taking those into account in the budgeting and design side of the project. So the system impact studies, so this is from a grid reliability and safety perspective. This was done by Strum Engineering, who's also done work for Mahone Bay and based in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. And what the DSIS, or Distribution System Impact Study, does is verify that the solar system can be connected to the grid without posing any reliability issues, safety issues for the Mahone Bay distribution system. And through that work, Strum was able to confirm that a 1.5 megawatt AC system could be connected technically into the grid without any cause for concerns in terms of reliability. And in order to do that, town of Mahone Bay would need to upgrade the poles along Pine Grove Street to wire the solar system into the substation there. So as part of those system impact studies, Strum had presented a number of different options in terms of system sizing and methods to connect those into the grid. And these were discussed with municipal electric utility staff to get the right solution for Mahone Bay. In terms of design services, so this is the actual detailed design work, electrical diagrams, civil site plans, mechanical drawings that would be issued in a tender package. That was awarded to NSI Technologies out of Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. So they conducted site optimization studies. So taking a look at the land that was available on the RPS site and then testing a number of different system sizes to find the point with the lowest cost of energy. So they've done the energy modeling for these systems, verified the costs and budgets for the systems, and then the economic models for the solar system as well. So the recommendation, you'll see this coming in a couple of slides here, is to upsize the solar systems, which helps minimize the cost of energy, and it'll provide the most cost-effective solution for the town of Mahone Bay. The work by NSI also confirmed some of the preliminary numbers that AREA had put together in terms of budgeting and solar economics. So we're happy with the results that have come out of that. And again, hasn't raised any concerns in terms of the technical or financial viability of the projects. The last one is resource measurement. So AREA posted an RFP for pyranometers, which is a type of sensor that measures solar irradiance at a site. So it can be used for project development activities like this, but then also for long-term monitoring of the asset to ensure that the modules and inverters and the equipment that's there is performing appropriately and performing within the manufacturer specifications. So that RFP hasn't been awarded yet, but came back within budget, and those devices we procured in order to do some resource measurement on the site, but then also for long-term performance monitoring as well. So this slide here is a summary of the design work that NSI had done to look at the system sizes, which you can see along the x-axis, listed in kilowatts of DC capacity, which is the nameplate rating on the solar panels, and then the levelized cost of energy. So this can be viewed as kind of the lifetime energy cost over a 25-year period for the solar asset. So as you can see from the graph, the lowest costs of energy are on system sizes in the range of about 2.1 megawatts or 2,100 kilowatts and above. And it starts to get more expensive after that, and the reason being is that we were using basically a fixed size of land. So if you put more and more solar into the same amount of area, you have to move the panels closer together. There's some inter-row shading that affects the productivity, but there's also limits on the AC interconnection capacity on the grid that the Scrum reports had highlighted. So as you move to these bigger system sizes, there's more curtailment and clipping as well, which is what's driving up the cost of energy for the larger system. So the activity here was with NSI was to make sure that we were able to find a point that represented the best value for the town of Mahone Bay in terms of system sizing. So the recommendation here from area is to upsize these systems to 2.2 megawatts in your community. So that's larger than I think had been previously discussed prior to these due diligence efforts. But the rationale for that is because of the cost of energy, and we're able to provide the best value to the community in that case in terms of energy costs. But it also provides the largest ability to offset residential net metered solar as well. And I think given the enthusiasm for decarbonization efforts within the municipality and its citizens, the ability to soak up that investment and enthusiasm within the community solar garden would be a positive aspect. In terms of funding the project, we'll get into the budgets and the breakdown between the federal, provincial, and municipal funding in a couple of slides. But I think important to highlight here that any municipal finance corporation debt that the town of Mahone Bay takes on as part of this project, it's our intent to structure it in the same way as the Ellers House Wind Farm. So the town would enter a long-term power purchase agreement with its municipal electric utility, and that power purchase agreement would ensure that the debt associated with the solar garden doesn't affect the municipal debt ratio. So we need to have that confirmed by the Department of Municipal Affairs, but we've had a number of conversations with them regarding the solar gardens, certainly have Department of Energy support on this, so we don't expect that to be an issue to secure that. Also, in terms of upsizing the system versus some of the original recommendations, I think really the opportunity is now, given the federal funding that's available and the emphasis on a green recovery or a clean recovery from the COVID situation. We've heard indications from our contacts within the federal government that they are anxious for shovel-ready projects like this. So it really is an excellent opportunity to for town of Mahone Bay and the other communities within the area group to provide provincial leadership on the solar file. So very exciting opportunity, and I think lots of potential support for that. I think another important note in terms of this slide is that the costs that are presented here, both in terms of later on in the budget and in terms of the LCOE that you're seeing here, the levelized cost of energy, these are strictly the costs of the equipment and construction. So there's no markups for either area or for the town of Mahone Bay in the power purchase agreement. So just important to keep that in mind as we look at the values here. So shown in this slide is the draft layout, physical layout for the Mahone Bay solar system at the RPS site. So on the western edge of that property, that's along Foxburg Road, with the access road coming in at the intersection of Foxburg and Pine Grove. So again, the recommendation was to upsize this system to 2.2 megawatts DC. Again, the nameplate capacity on the solar panels to minimize that cost of energy for Mahone Bay and to maximize the amount of residential and commercial solar that can be absorbed through the project. So excitingly, a project of that size would supply Mahone Bay with 18% of its total annual electricity consumption with clean on-peak solar energy. I think that would have to be one of the leading, if not the leading community in Canada in terms of solar energy as a percentage of your electrical supply. And I think also very exciting and leading probably in the country is town-owned renewables. So with the solar garden, town-owned renewables in Mahone Bay would be over 60%. So very exciting in terms of the renewable energy that's there, but also the town ownership and participation in that clean energy transition. For the solar garden, we've designed it so that there's an opportunity for battery storage to be installed down the road. So AREA's been looking at the economics of battery storage, and given the way the rates are structured right now, there isn't a strong economic case for battery storage, even with the funding that's available through Infrastructure Canada. But when we look at the cost declines of a lot of these clean energy technologies, storage included, we certainly want to make sure that anything that we put in the ground today is backwards compatible, and we've got the ability to upgrade that system down the road to incorporate technologies like energy storage. So we're doing that from a design standpoint. You can see the rectangle there just to the south of that access road, and that's where a future battery storage installation could be put in. So we're making sure we cover that from a design standpoint. Again, access would be along Foxburg Road with the wiring back to the substation along Pine Grove. So the lease negotiations with RPS are still underway for this land, but we're confident we're going to get to a good resolution there. And I think just to highlight as well, we're making sure there's appropriate protections in that lease for the municipality, given the past use of the site as an industrial zone. So that lease, once it's ready, it's with a legal firm now who's drafting up the terms, but certainly we'd be presented to council for their review prior to it being signed and moving forward. But we're very confident that that's going to come together. And I think excitingly for the municipality as well, that lease negotiation will allow the development of a potential industrial park, clean industrial park, even down the road, that'll be shared with to the south of the solar garden. So exciting opportunity there as well. So wanted to talk about the project structure for the solar gardens, and this is the recommendation from AREA based on the discussions that we've had with the municipalities, as well as looking at the terms of the Infrastructure Canada funding agreement. So in order to allow each of the area municipalities maximum flexibility in how they structure their community solar program in terms of how folks, citizens or businesses are able to participate, we're recommending that the towns own the solar systems and that the town enter that long-term power purchase agreement with their municipal electric utility in order to make sure the debt that they take on isn't counted towards their municipal debt ratio. And I think important to note as we're talking about this as well in terms of ownership is we're seeing that there'd be an opportunity for citizens to buy into and invest in the project with the town. So any debt that the town takes on with Municipal Finance Corp, they could use that citizen investment to buy down that debt. In terms of construction and operations, we're recommending that AREA perform as a general contractor on behalf of the towns. There's several advantages to that, chiefly that we'll be able to aggregate the procurement and construction of this site along with the other two sites in Berwick and Antigonish. So we're able to achieve superior economics through those economies of scale versus if the town was to do this project by themselves rather than with the other two area municipalities as well. Also having area self-perform as a design build contractor on behalf of the 3 municipalities allows for a greater ability of control over both the equipment selection and the design practices that go into the system. So in all 3 communities, we've been sharing the draft layouts and design criteria with the municipal electric utility staff, so they get the ability to provide commentary on that, feedback on that, and make sure that the project aligns with their expectations in terms of safety, protection equipment for the grid in Mahone Bay. So that ability for area to perform as the construction contractor gives us a lot of control over that, and also allows us to make sure that the technology that we put into these projects has a high degree of value, warranties and protections for the communities in terms of minimizing long-term operations and maintenance risks. So the funding that's available. So Infrastructure Canada and the province of Nova Scotia have signed a bilateral agreement that governs the terms of how they support infrastructure projects. And that's through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Plan, which has 5 main pillars, one of which is green infrastructure, which this project would be covered under. And the non-repayable funding that's available through Infrastructure Canada is significant. So from the federal government, their contribution would be 40% non-repayable, and that's available through that green stream, which this project would count as. That would come with a match of 33% through the provincial government. So in total, 73% non-repayable from the other 2 levels of government. And then the final 27% would come from the municipality and citizens that invest in the project. So we're recommending that in order to get the project off the ground, once we've secured the federal funding, that the 27% municipal and citizen contribution would be done through the Municipal Finance Corp. And then as citizens buy into the project, citizens and businesses buy into the project and invest in the project, that the town of Mahone Bay could then buy down that Municipal Finance Corp debt with the investment that's brought in from those citizens and businesses who wish to participate in the project. So we really see the time for community solar is now. 73% non-repayable funding. The deals don't really get much better than that, and this really does offset any future potential cost declines in solar energy. It really is a perfect time to move forward with a project like this. And again, this project lines up very well with the way the federal government has been indicating it wants to do a clean recovery. And these projects, given the due diligence work that's gone already, really are shovel ready, and I think provide an excellent opportunity for the municipality to take advantage of that funding that's available. And I think, highlighting again the provincial involvement in this, the Department of Energy has really encouraged the municipalities and area to take a lead on community solar in Nova Scotia. So right now whether it's the municipal electric utilities or Nova Scotia Power Territory, there is no community solar model in the province. Department of Energy would really like to see that happen and for someone to make it work. And really that's to address a lot of the same issues that I was highlighting earlier in the presentation around equitable access for all ratepayers and removing some of those capital cost barriers. So we really see this as a great opportunity for Mahone Bay and the other 2 area municipalities to lead on this file and to really show the rest of the province the way forward with community solar in Nova Scotia. I should highlight as well, the non-repayable contributions here are significant, 73%, but they are required to make the economics work. So because Mahone Bay owns its own municipal electric utility and has access to wind energy through the Eller's House wind farm and the wholesale electricity market, it is able to procure cost-effective electricity, and we need to make sure that the solar electricity that's generated from this project is cost competitive with those other sources. And at the moment where the costs of solar are, the funding that's in place is required to make the economics work. So important to highlight that, in that the project does need to secure that infrastructure funding award in order to proceed to make the economics viable. So I mentioned the way this project fits in with the green recovery. So, you know, there has been a lot of folks that have been displaced due to COVID-19. There's also traditional industries, whether those are, you know, through pulp and paper or the economic downturn out west, and folks, Nova Scotians coming home from that that have been displaced. And we really see these projects as an excellent opportunity to retrain people in clean energy. We've been discussing this with Department of Energy extensively as well. So they've put us in contact with folks at NSCC and some of the solar training programs that NSCC has put together to support the Efficiency Nova Scotia Solar Homes program. So we're really looking at opportunities to put people back to work in your communities and to retrain folks who may not have had the opportunity to participate in clean energy before. So I think this is it's an exciting opportunity and aligns well with the way the federal government, the other levels of government are viewing the clean recovery out of COVID. So back to the economics around the project. So again, areas recommending that 2.2 megawatt DC community solar garden. That's to minimize the cost of energy and drive the maximum amount of value to the town of Mahone Bay. That project of that size would have a capital cost budget of $4.5 million before any markups or incremental costs for area or the town. So just important to recognize again that that's the kind of the raw construction costs of materials costs for a project like this. So when we look at the federal, provincial, and municipal and citizen contribution here, federal contribution through that Green Infrastructure Fund, 40% would be approximately $1.8 million. The 33% provincial contribution would be just under $4.5 million, and the municipal and citizen contribution would be approximately $1.2 million. So again, these numbers would be subject to change once we've got the chance to discuss you know, how those budgets may be adjusted if there's markups for either area of the towns within this, but this is a starting point based on the costs associated with the project. So in terms of the economics, we'll take a look here at the first 5 years of the project. So the energy cost that you saw previously was a levelized cost of energy, so you can consider that kind of the lifetime cost of energy of the project. But when you look at the individual energy cost in each year, there's actually additional savings in the early years of the project, and then those slowly escalate over time as operational and maintenance costs are factored in. So if we look at year one of the project, we'd expect a 2.2 megawatt DC solar farm to produce just under 2,500 megawatt hours in that year. The Municipal Finance Corporation debt, the repayment on that, assuming a 20-year loan at a 3% fixed interest rate, would be just under $80,000. The O&M costs associated with the solar farm would be just under $60,000, and town administration and marketing. So we budgeted that in here to make sure that on-bill crediting and any incremental costs associated with the administration of that is captured, as well as the citizen engagement and marketing activities associated with the community solar garden are captured. So that'd be approximately $10,000. So we're looking at total expenses of about $148,000. And if you divide that total cost by the amount of energy generated in that year, we'll be looking at an energy cost of $60 a megawatt hour. And then you can follow that through the different years of the project. So you can see that the Municipal Finance Corporation debt would be fixed. Again, we're the way we've done the economic modeling is a 20-year loan, fixed 3% interest rate. The operational maintenance costs are escalating at 2% annually with inflation. Same for the administration and marketing costs. And again, important to highlight that these are the costs of energy only based on raw equipment costs and construction costs. So there's no additional markups for the town in that power purchase agreement price. That's the raw cost there. I think again, and I don't know if I really spoke to this earlier, but it's important to note that the solar energy is obviously it's locally owned, but it's clean and it's on peak as well within the municipal distribution zone. So as you folks are probably aware, there's a number of tariffs that are associated with the Ellers House wind farm and accessing the transmission system and bringing that wind from Ellers House into your community, and also for the wholesale power procurement to move that energy from the borders of the province and bring it to the community. There's transmission tariffs associated with that, and those transmission tariffs are subject to change over time. So locally owned clean energy within your distribution zone is completely immune from those transmission tariffs. So there's considerable value there, and again, this would be 18% of your annual electricity cost is clean, on peak, owned by the town, and immune to any changes in transmission tariffs by Nova Scotia Power. So in terms of next steps and a schedule for the project, so you know, between January and now, we've been focusing on the due diligence and activities for these projects. So that's included Lenta, Thinkwell, Shift, and Catherine's activities in terms of community engagement and the marketing strategy for the load growth initiatives and the community solar gardens, the geotechnical investigations that took place on the site, the distribution system impact studies, the design work, economic analysis that's taken place. So we've been busy with that over the last 6 months. So next step in this that we see is council approval to move forward with a funding application to Infrastructure Canada. And again, that's just council approval to submit that application. We're not looking for a commitment to spend any money yet, but to put in that application so we can move forward with the project. Once that application's in, there's probably a several month, 4 month or so turnaround time for it to be reviewed by Infrastructure Canada and the province, because they've got a stake in that as well with their 33% contribution. While that funding application is being processed, we'll be finishing out the design work. So what you saw earlier was the draft, the concept draft of how the system would be laid out. There's also been an electrical single line diagram submitted to municipal electric utility staff for review and commentary. So we'll be finishing the construction drawing phase of the project. Once the construction drawings are complete, we would be issuing tenders for the construction services associated with the project. And this would be done in parallel to that funding application. And there would be wording in the tenders or RFPs that it is subject to council approval and to receiving that funding. What we're trying to do here is to run some of these activities in parallel so that as soon as that funding is awarded and council has approved us to move forward, that we're able to hit the ground running with construction in the fall, which is where we're aiming for is a second council approval to proceed, and then construction activities to take place in the fall of this year. And I think important to note here is that Lenta, Thinkwell, Shift, and Catherine have been involved in the marketing activities and marketing strategy that's being developed behind both the solar gardens and the load growth activities that area has been involved with. So we are planning to roll out ambassadors into the communities in the fall of this year, September. Again, that would be subject to any rules the province may have around COVID, but tentatively that's what we're planning, and that activity will be ongoing even after construction is complete, so that making sure that citizens are aware of the project, how they can become engaged with it, how they can invest and participate. So that'll be an ongoing activity even past post construction phase. So to summarize, really the focus of the Solar Gardens project is to align the renewable energy asset with what the ratepayers in Mahone Bay and the citizens are asking for, which is an opportunity to decarbonize and an opportunity to participate in that clean energy transition and to invest in renewable energy. And structuring the project as a community solar system owned by the town where citizens can invest, that really creates a win-win for the municipality and for the ratepayers, and alleviates some of the concerns that a municipal utility would typically have with traditional net metered solar energy. Recap of the due diligence work that we've done to date. So none of the activities that have been done to date have raised any concerns in terms of the technical or financial viability of the projects, which is great. And we're recommending that Mahone Bay proceed with a 2.2 megawatt DC project. And that again is to minimize the cost of energy that comes out of that system, provide the maximum value to the community. And that's coming in the form of clean on-peak energy for the utility, or for the town, excuse me, which would add up to approximately 18% of your total electricity consumption would be coming from that town-owned solar system within your distribution zone, and immune to any potential future changes to the tariffs that govern the energy from the Ellis House wind farm, or the import of energy from other suppliers. So this project obviously fits well with the way the federal government is viewing a green recovery effort, and we really think, given the significant non-repayable funding that's available, that the time now is now to act. And we do have provincial government support on this through the Department of Energy. They are anxious to see community solar proven in Nova Scotia, and I think they've tapped the municipal electric utilities to do that, and that's why they're supporting our due diligence efforts through that Low Carbon Communities Fund. Again, I think important to highlight that that community engagement and marketing activity, that's something that we see taking place throughout this project process, so that folks and citizens are aware of what's going on in their towns, and we're able to harness the enthusiastic energy and make sure they're supporters of the project, and aware of the deliverables and dates associated with it. And again, that's coming back to those community ambassadors, which are tentatively scheduled for this fall. I didn't get into this earlier, but should have touched on it. You know, this community solar project, it also supports the electrification initiatives of the municipality as well. So it provides citizens with more options on clean energy and ways to participate in clean energy in their home or business. So if they're looking to electrify their transportation, so if they want to buy an electric vehicle, they can power that with clean solar energy. If they're looking to electrify their heating system, whether that's electric heat pumps that the municipality will be promoting, or electric water heating, or whatever it is, citizens and businesses are able to use their investments in solar energy to make sure that electricity that's powering their transportation, their heating, or other needs within their home or business is clean. So I think this really fits with the electrification initiatives within the municipality, which can help drive revenue for the MEU, but then also back that up with a clean energy supply. And then finally, I touched on this earlier, but the lease negotiations are ongoing with RPS. That'll include access for land for the solar garden, include the ability for Mahone Bay to expand into an industrial park, a clean industrial park down the road to the south of the solar garden. And again, to highlight that we're making sure we're covering Mahone Bay in terms of risks given the past use of that site. So that's the final slide for me. I just want to thank council for the time to listen to the presentation, and now happy to take any questions, comments about the project.
You're muted, Richard.
Yeah, just at the very beginning, you had mentioned about the MEU costs with the buying back and stuff like that. But that's only if the utility decides on buying extra that any individual panels might produce. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So that analysis came out of the Berwick Electric Commission, and that was where they were looking at, yes, where the utility was buying back any excess solar power. So the municipality would have the ability to allow that or not in Mahone Bay. And I think what we're trying to do with the solar garden is to give folks another alternative to invest in solar energy without having to go through that traditional net metering process.
If I could just add to that one as well, Mr. Mayor, can I add to that one? I just wanted to add, just, as we have viewers as well, and I know the councilor's been familiar with this, but when a home generates only for their own purposes, even though, they may not be selling any surplus back at an inflated rate, they also are not contributing because they've cut off their own demand. They're not contributing to the cost of the system that exists to serve them in the case that they do need it, and also exists to serve the community, streetlights and everything else. Fixed costs that already exist in the form of maintaining that system continue to be the responsibility of the town. So just want to make sure that everyone also understands that when we have a rooftop solar installation, it's not simply a higher cost of energy, but also it's downloading the remainder of the system costs to other residents.
Okay, Joseph?
Mayor, I think that was a terrific introductory presentation. As you know, council hasn't had, a significant amount of exposure to this initiative to date. So this was a terrific introduction. I think I would appreciate it if we could schedule a future discussion and a follow-up after this meeting, perhaps in camera. I know I have a number of questions that would probably be more appropriately held in camera, where commercially sensitive information could be queried upon, as well as some specific contract terms and business model questions, as well as a very significant deep dive into the math behind the unit costs, and things that are probably our guests tonight may be more comfortable dealing with in a closed session. So I'll leave that with you, depending on your thinking about the matter, but that's where my head was.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Carver.
Yes, thanks, Sean. That was a great presentation. I'm curious to know more about the focus groups at the beginning and how many people were involved, and whether cost to individual purchasers or investors was a part of the discussion. And did any participants in the focus groups indicate that, yes, I'm in, I really want to do this?
So I'm going to hand that over to Lenta. She's the expert on the focus groups.
We had 2 focus groups in Mahone Bay, one for keeners and one for the general public. We had 6 participants in our first group and 7 in the other. And with regards to participation, we got an overwhelming yes that they would want to participate in an initiative like that and want to co-invest with the town in a project like this.
And was the actual cost or amount of money that would be required to buy in discussed in the focus groups?
That was not discussed. The participants in the focus groups were looking for a favorable return on investment. We didn't, at that stage, we didn't discuss any pricing as we wouldn't have known, but they were interested in a favorable return on investment.
And I'm sorry, I didn't hear the figure that you said on the second focus group. There were 6 in one group and how many in the other?
I believe 7 in the second group.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll pick up on an important point that Lenta touched on there is around the return on investment. So I think I missed that in the presentation. So the intent with how we structure the compensation for folks that are involved is that the return for them will be equal to or better than the return on a residential residential solar system. So we want to make this an attractive offer for the citizens that they are able to buy in and participate and have an economic return on that. So the return will be equal to or better than residential solar without any of the risks associated with it in terms of the construction or operation of the project, because they'll be handing that on to the town. So I just wanted to touch on that.
So that the implied business model would be that a resident could have a piece of the generation, but without any of the operating risks. So 100% of the operating risks would reside with the town.
That's right. The town and area would be managing the solar guard.
So this is, we're not selling equity in the project. We're only selling right to purchase the power at a pre-described price, at a pre-described rate.
So that's a good question, and this is something that is still yet to be determined. I think may be better suited to an in-camera session as well. But that's something we're looking at, this idea of equity versus fixed return, and I think merits further discussion.
Okay.
And just furthering the closed session nature of that, I want to add there's some legal question there as well with our status as a municipality in soliciting investment and in the manner in which we do that. So that's one of the other things that still needs to be probably a closed session discussion.
Okay. Councillor O'Neill.
Just with respect to the timing. Oh, and I should say, Sean, excellent presentation. Thank you so much. Well done. Is there any particular urgency to move into that closed session? Do you have a sense of what the timing is for next steps?
So, I think the immediate action item from the area side is we would like to have council's permission to move forward with an Infrastructure Canada funding application. So understood that council may want to have a deeper dive into the economics and business models that would underpin the project before providing that go ahead on the funding application. So I can make myself available kind of at council's need for that session. Happy to do that at any time. And I think the sooner the better on that. Ideally, we'd like to have that funding application in within the next few weeks. This Infrastructure Canada Fund is publicly known about. There are other projects and entities that would be lining up for opportunities to take advantage of that. So I think time is of the essence, and we would want to move forward sooner rather than later on an application.
Okay. Is there, just for my own scheduling, is there a hard cutoff in terms of the application deadline?
No, there's not. It's an open window, but it is first come, first serve. So we would like to move forward as soon as we can with it.
Okay, Councillor Carver?
There, the time frame for the council approval and go ahead for construction was given on your chart as October 2020. And the municipal election is scheduled for the third Saturday of October. So I'm wondering how those two events fit together.
That is a very good point, and I think something we would need to be area would need to take into consideration. So I think the intent of that slide was to say that we would need to come back to council and receive council's approval prior to moving forward with a construction project, even if we were awarded the funding through Infrastructure Canada. So we view this as a two-step process in terms of council's approval. One, the approval to submit an application, and then two, approval to proceed were the funding awarded. So yes, point taken that the municipal election timelines will need to be respected and thought about in terms of that second approval step were we awarded the funding.
May I have a second question, Mayor?
Supplemental.
So for people to buy in, will they be required to be residents of the town of Mahone Bay, or could people who live outside of the town of Mahone Bay buy in?
So I think that would be up to town staff and council to decide. So I mentioned previously about the towns owning the solar systems and having maximum flexibility in how they constructed their own programs, and this would be specifically to address that question, so that Mahone Bay, Berwick, and Antigonish may all take different approaches to how folks are able to participate, whether or not they have to be citizens or ratepayers within that town or not. So I think that's certainly an open question, and something the municipality would have the flexibility to decide on how it would like to approach it and how it would like folks to participate. So we're not going to be areas, certainly not prescriptive on that. That would be for town council to decide.
Okay, Mr. Hyde.
Yeah, I was just going to speak on the closed session scheduling point. We are in a session right now in a special meeting. In order to allow for maybe questions to be provided to Sean, even briefly, a closed session can be undertaken as part of this meeting. So it might be a good opportunity before we wrap to have a brief closed session this meeting, and just make sure that Sean is aware of any questions that he can be working on to expedite answers back to council in this regard.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Carver.
I can't quite visualize how the new lines would get from Pine Grove to the substation. How would that work?
So the proposal there would be to upgrade the existing poles along Pine Grove. So new poles would be installed, and the existing wiring would be transferred to those poles, and then a new line run from the solar garden to the substation.
Sorry, I'm just not visualizing how it gets from Pine Grove to the substation. It would have to go through the Jubilee Woods or the old school grounds. Would it not?
Penny, the line does, if I could just interject, the line does currently run across the old school grounds.
It does, okay.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
it would just be upgrading that line.
Upgrading the existing. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Sean, for your presentation. As you can see, there's a ravenous interest at council for the solar project. And I think, as CAO has suggested, that there are some questions that should be addressed in an in-camera scenario. Entertain a motion to go in camera. So moved by Mr. Feeney, Seconded. Councillor
Second.
Carver, CAO, did you wish to comment?
Just while we're in discussion on this, after the motion to go into closed session is resolved, but before we actually go into a closed session, could we take a second to ask if there are questions from the YouTube channel? So if we won't
Good
go back.
idea. My apologies to the people watching.
There are some questions. So
Okay.
so the first one is, if the solar garden has a guarantee.
Kelly, sorry to
Yes?
interrupt. I know I suggested this, but I actually meant after we have the vote, but before we all leave the meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay, so we will, your suggestion is that we address the questions after the in-camera when we come back?
No, not at all. I just, sorry, I wanted to interject while we were in discussion on the motion, which we still are.
Oh, I see.
And I just
Okay.
wanted to say that we should vote on the motion before Kelly reads the
Alright.
questions.
We have a motion on the floor to go in cameras, been moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion's carried. Before we actually do that, we will have the questions from the citizens. Kelly?
Okay, yes. So if the solar gardens has a guaranteed PPA sale of energy to MD Electric, then the MFC debt has no effect on the town's cash flow or finances, as the debt is offset by the revenue.
Yes, that's the intent. So that's currently how the Municipal Finance Corp debt under the investment in the Ellers House wind farm works, is because area has the long-term power purchase agreement with the MEU, that debt doesn't count towards the municipal debt ratio. So the intent is the same here, that it be structured the same way, but instead of area owning the asset, in this case, it would be the town of Mahone Bay owning the asset and entering the long-term PPA with its municipal electric utility.
Okay, next question, if the debt is offset 100% by revenue, why is there a need for citizens to buy down the town's debt?
So that's not necessarily required that the debt that, or the investment from the citizens be used to pay down that MFC debt. Town of Mahone Bay could use that investment as they see fit. One option of which would be to buy down that debt. But the purpose of the project is to have citizen participation and investment in this initiative rather than in rooftop solar. So we are, I think, hoping that folks would invest and participate, and then the town could use those funds as it sees fit. One option of which would be to pay down the debt.
Next question, why doesn't area own and operate the solar farms like it does the wind farm, or at least a separate municipal corporation created?
So this is really to have each municipality within the area group have maximum flexibility in terms of how they design their own program. So there was the question earlier about, could citizens inside or outside the municipality participate? If the town owns it, it has absolute flexibility to design the program as they see fit for their scenario. And it also, given the way the Infrastructure Canada funding agreements are worded and some of the conditions in there, it's significantly better to have municipal ownership rather than area ownership of the asset.
Why isn't there a profit margin in the project with dividends to the town as per area?
So I think that's better addressed in an in-camera session.
Okay. Will the lease protect the town's solar garden owner against any environmental claims, present or future, in respect to the property and past use of the property?
Absolutely, 100%. So certainly sensitive to that, given the property's past use. So that's been specifically highlighted to legal counsel to make sure that those appropriate protections are included in the lease. And obviously council will have the opportunity to review that lease and the terms and protections it affords prior to it being signed with RPS.
There is legislation governing the municipal taxation of wind farms. Will there be similar legislation governing the taxation of solar gardens?
No, not at this time. There's no provincial legislation around that.
Besides the kilowatt hour reduction from purchasing from other sources, will a demand factor reduction be realized, reducing the town's peak demand? And what is the estimated monthly demand savings in kilowatts?
No, so there wouldn't be. Energy production from a solar system is highly variable based on the weather. You know, is it sunny or not? So solar systems in our climate can't be reliably used to reduce peak demand kilowatts. So they're used to reduce energy kilowatt hours. So no, there would not be associated demand reduction.
With this self-generation, will this reduce the backup power requirements now being paid to NSPI and reduce the backup fees now being paid to NSPI? And if so, by how much?
No, so same thing as the demand reduction. It's not a firm energy production that the solar garden affords. It's, you know, when it's sunny, there's energy production. When it's cloudy, there's lower production. So it wouldn't affect any of the backup fees associated with NSPI and the transmission system.
With this self-generation that would not be affected by an NSPI outage, and if there was an outage, could the power be directed to specific users?
No, it wouldn't be. So under the Canadian Electrical Code, if there is an outage on the grid, any solar system attached to that grid has to automatically shut down and stay off until grid power is restored. So that's for it's for electrical safety and the safety of the linemen that may be out repairing that outage. So that is a requirement under the Canadian Electrical Code. So if there is an outage on the Mahone Bay grid, the solar system would have to shut down in order to comply with that rule. We are investigating battery storage, like I mentioned previously. So we've looked at the economics of that, and we have set aside an area on the site for that, as well as from a design perspective. So if you did have battery storage, there would be some ability to provide some redundancy or backup loads. But it would be at the substation level, not at the individual circuit or customer level.
At present, the MB utility has a regulation in respect to solar power. Question. How does this project affect this regulation? How does the utility purchasing solar power from the farm affect individuals who do intend to install or have already installed solar power in their homes?
So my understanding is that net metering currently isn't allowed in Mahone Bay. So the solar garden wouldn't have any change on that rule. So the intent of the solar garden, again, is to have citizens invest in this system rather than in a traditional rooftop solar system. So no change to that.
What is being proposed to protect the solar garden from intruders, vandalism, and weather?
So there'd be a fence around the entire solar garden site that includes signage for high voltage and shock. So this would be similar to the way the existing substation would be protected. You'd have a set off and a fence to protect against intruders. In terms of weather, there wouldn't be any special requirements for that. You know, solar systems are designed to be outside. So any of the structural components would be designed for the appropriate snow and wind loading in the area, stamped off by a licensed professional engineer registered in Nova Scotia. Any of the electronics would be, you know, appropriately sealed in appropriately rated enclosures. So no special protections there that are outside of industry best practices for these systems.
Is there a sample budget outlining revenues and expenditures for the solar gardens?
Yeah, so I think it was slide 13. There was a sample budget in there, and certainly, you know, if council wants to get into further details, we can do that in the in-camera session.
Has the 0.5% to 1% yearly energy degradation of the solar panels been factored in?
Yes, so the economic model includes 0.5% annual degradation on the output of the solar farm. So you'd see that on that slide 13 where it has the annual energy for years 1 through 5. So that's been factored in across the entire life of the system. And that's reflective in the LCOE number, the levelized cost of energy, on the optimization slide. So 0.5%, that would be in line with a top quality or high-end solar panel, and it's also in line with the publicly published figures from the US Department of Energy's National Renewable Energy Lab, where they've done a long-term lifetime study on solar systems in the US and Europe over the last about 20 years, and measuring their performance degradation over time. So we've stuck with the industry specifications and long-term modeling or result studies, and used the 0.5% in that.
And that's all the questions.
Boy, very inquisitive citizenry. Love it. Okay, with that,
You should all have a link for the closed session in your email. Just check the calendar.
just check your calendar. Okay, we are going to go in camera. Thank you, citizens, for participating. Councillor Carver?
Are we coming back to this one after the closed session?
I wouldn't anticipate it in this
I don't
case. That's
think
why we
so.
did the Q&A.
Okay.
All right, so see you on the other side.